We just got to recognize this is an evil regime. They've killed more of their own people than any other regime in the history of mankind, and we've been treating them like a normal country.
Ahead of President Trump's visit to China, I'm sitting down with Sam Brownback, former ambassador, governor, and senator, and author of the new book, China's War on Faith. Human rights, when it comes to the Chinese regime, are basically the no-go zone publicly, aren't they?
This is a strategy of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's one that we should turn around and use as an offensive tool against them.
After decades in public service, Brownback says he's now confronting the biggest beast of his career.
They've built a satellite set of countries, and they're exporting this digital authoritarianism technology to at least 80 different countries that we've tracked. They are at war with us, whether we realize we're at war with them or not.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Sam Brownback, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be back with you. And I always enjoy our conversations and how we look at the world and some of the huge dangers in the world today. And I appreciate you're willing to surface them and to shine a light on it for people.
Well, huge congratulations on today's launch of China's War on Faith, your new book. Before we go talking about it, let's talk about the visit of President Trump to China, meeting with Xi Jinping. Do you expect that human rights issues might be raised there?
I have pretty low expectations on this first meeting. I think President Trump is going to try to really be as bromance-oriented as possible, probably. Just trying to, okay, let's try to be nice to each other. Let's try to settle things down in the world. I hope he raises some of these issues. He's said he's going to, raise Pastor Ezra Jin. I wouldn't doubt he'll raise some of the individual isolated cases, but I'm just not expecting too much because the Chinese Communist Party has set their face. They're arresting hundreds of Christian pastors now. They beat on all these other people of faith. They've done wolf diplomacy around the world. Their long-term strategy has been pretty obvious for some time, and to abruptly move away from that at this point in time seems unlikely to me.
And just something that's really interesting, which I hadn't thought about recently, the NTD White House correspondent Mary Otsu got a question into Secretary Rubio about whether human rights were raised. I'm going to mention that in a moment. But basically, human rights, when it comes to the Chinese regime, are basically the no-go zone publicly, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah.
They want to raise Taiwan all the time, but you're kind of going, okay, we'll let you raise Taiwan. We want to talk about Tibet and East Turkestan then. Taiwan, you said you own that. Well, you don't own these other guys then. Well, no, you can't raise those issues. You can't talk about any of those issues, and you can't talk about Tibetan Buddhism, and you can't talk about how we're treating the Uyghurs. So, it's all duplicity on their part, and I think we just got to recognize, look, this is an evil regime. They've killed more of their own people than any other regime in the history of mankind, and we've been treating them like a normal country. And I think we're not ready for the full square off right now, but these two systems are inevitably headed for that.
Let me read to you what Mari asked and how Secretary Rubio responded in that recent press briefing at the White House.
You've long been a leading voice on human rights in China, and so including religious persecution and forced organ harvesting. So President Trump prepares to meet Xi Jinping next week. Do you expect human rights concerns to be on the table? Or
well, we always raise those issues, and they remain true. And I think we've proven in some cases it's most effective to raise them in the appropriate setting. But we always raise those issues. They're important to us, among with others, of course. But those issues remain prominent in our view and in our conversation about these things. And we'll continue to raise them in the appropriate forums.
What do you take from that?
I take there's not going to be much said about it from that. Marco Rubio can't change his spots. He's a hot-blooded American with Cuban descent. He does not like communism. His family has felt directly the impact of communism on them. He has no love for that system whatsoever, and he doesn't have any love for it in China either. But I take from that sort of statement, it's like, I mean, I'm sure there'll be some mention of it somewhere. I'm sure there'll be some discussion of it, but I wouldn't have high expectations that there'll be much put on it.
You argue in the book that there are 3 genocides happening in China, which is a pretty significant thing to say. I happen to agree with you on exactly on this, actually, but why don't you lay out the argument for me?
The three are the Uyghur genocide. It's primarily Muslim Uyghurs. They're kind of fine with the Uyghur culture, but they're not with Islam. It's the only country in the world I've been able to find you cannot name a child Muhammad. But that's one that's been publicly declared. But there's a genocide that's been going on in Tibet. Tibetan Buddhists, initially they slaughtered so many of the Tibetan Buddhists and the leaders, and now it's a cultural genocide, just really trying to rid the place of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. They want to name the next Dalai Lama. The Chinese Communist Party, an officially atheistic group, wants to name the next official leader of Tibetan Buddhism, a faith, which is just galling and ironic at the same time. And then Falun Gong. They have decimated this group that got up by Chinese numbers to 90 million at one point in time, probably down 20 million. Who knows really what the actual number is. And on the most diabolical, barbaric ways of locking people up, throwing them in jail, forced organ harvesting, as you've written about. It's things. If somebody wrote about this and said it happened in the 15th century, you could kind of go, well, I can see that. But today, and it's happening. And that's why I say these are 3 genocides, because the intent is there to literally wipe out this group, this culture.
Just to talk about that for a moment, right? You're using the word genocide very specifically according to its sort of original intent. This word is used flippantly these days. I mean, usually to describe significant amounts of death, but what you're talking about is something different.
Well, I'm talking about the legal definition of it, where there is an intent to specifically wipe out or destroy a group of people. That's the official kind of the measure you're supposed to look at genocide. And you can see that in these 3 cases. There is a specific intent to destroy this group of people. And that's what's taking place, and that's why it fits the definition of having a 3rd genocide. And it just bothers me no end that then we still kind of treat them as a normal country. I went to a movie last week, Hail Mary, and I'm not highly recommending the movie, but the lead pilot of the rocket, it's a sci-fi movie, has a Chinese Communist flag on his sleeve. And he's the lead pilot for this rocket, and it's kind of he's the good guy. And I'm going, what are you doing here? What is this flag doing in this movie, saving the Earth? And why is Hollywood putting this out? And I make the point in the book, Hollywood hadn't put out a film that's negative towards the Chinese Communist Party or the CCP since 1997. 7 years in Tibet, in Kundun. That's the last time, because they're so tied economically and the marketing of the films. And I'm saying, it's time to stop this, guys. Come on.
Well, it's interesting. I recently watched The Martian, and in that film, it's another. I think that's actually the book is by the same author that wrote Hail Mary. I think so, if I recall correctly. But there's a kind of a subplot where they have to get help from the Chinese. Some sort of booster, and the Chinese are shown to be very benevolently wanting to help the Americans, which I wish were true. And certainly there's Chinese people in China that would do that, but the regime absolutely would not.
No, they wouldn't. Yeah. The regime wouldn't do that. And I am for the Chinese people. I have an adopted Chinese daughter who I love dearly. I love the Chinese people. I love the Chinese culture. I do not like the Chinese Communist Party, nor what they've done to the Chinese people or the country itself. And that's really a critical point to make, that this is the problem, is the Chinese Communist Party. And for all President Xi's talk about sinicization of it, which I find really amazing in many respects, because the real interlocutor and the real stranger in China is communism. That's a European invention, industrial age European invention that they've put on the Chinese people. That's the one that needs to be sinicized out of the place.
You know, you're just reminding me, this is something I haven't really covered yet, I'm going to go astray a little bit of religion, or faith, which is the main focus of our talk today. But there are these new rules in China around assimilation of ethnic minorities. And I'm wondering if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, what a horrible idea.
I mean, like, what exactly are they doing? I mean, this is official. They're implementing some kind of official policy on this. It's almost, I mean, it wasn't so horrible, it would be comical.
Well, and if it wasn't something that places in the world had already done and failed and hurt people doing, I mean, you can look at our treatment of the American Indians, the Native Americans in this country, and where we said, okay, we're going to really try to make you like European settlers. We're going to try to make you like us, and it hurt people. It killed them. We tried to make their culture our culture. It was a horrible, failed, deadly thing that we did 100 years ago, and I carried the apology bill for it, and there's still remnants of it, and China's trying to do that today. And why are you doing it? Why not let these cultures live and thrive? Why not let people practice the faith the way they want to practice it? And it's because the Chinese Communist Party must, they believe, maintain strict, tight control over everybody and every thought. And that's the way they're going to press it in that country, and that's what they're exporting to their satellite countries around the world.
You know, one thing I wanted to mention is, the way that the Chinese regime is very, very effective at using its propaganda, right? So they would say, for example, hey, look at the effects of multicultural policy in America. Look at the discord and the problems that's created here, right? That's what they'd say.
Well, that's what they would say, and this
which it has, in fact, right? But this is what I guess what I'm trying to get at is what they're doing is not the same thing, right?
No.
Yeah.
And I would argue that this country has assimilated more people of different cultures from around the world than any country in history of mankind, and by and large successfully, not without our problems and not without our miscues and missteps at different times that's happened. When we first brought Chinese into this country and the mistreatment of Chinese, or you could say that about the Irish or the Italians, or you could kind of almost say that about any group, but over time, the salad bowl, the mixing pot kind of worked, and it brought people together, and people came together around a common set of thoughts and ideas, not around a landmass. And it's about freedom. We believe in freedom. We believe in freedom for everybody. We believe in the human dignity of each and every individual to be able to decide that. They're doing nothing of that nature. They're trying to homogenize everybody into a communist Han Chinese. And it's not going to work. It's not going to be helpful for their society. It's punitive, it's damaging, it is deadly. And it really should be stopped and also just called out for what it is. This is just you guys trying to bring everybody in under the Chinese Han umbrella and make them all atheist communist.
Well, it's just, I know so many people that, kind of risked a lot basically to come here to be able to basically make something of themselves, live that American dream. This was something, the assimilation, right? It was not a forced assimilation. It was a highly willing assimilation, as long as Americans remained proud, and of course it was encouraged, right? Because it's a great system, and so this is your juxtaposition here is very apt, because over there this is a strictly coercive idea in the first place, that policy. And so it again, I marvel at the way the communists are so good at fostering this propaganda and kind of twisting whatever is happening to kind of suit their own needs.
Yeah, but we've got to confront it, and we should confront it. It's been interesting to me to watch the AI move, because you put a question in on AI and it answers it. But in their closed system that they have, because they control all the media, and they've got the great Chinese firewall on the internet, and you can't get in inside of that. But the AI searches everything, so you plug in what's the Chinese dream, and the answer came back to move to America.
Really?
Yeah.
And which? Oh, like on the American ones or on the Chinese ones? On the Chinese ones.
Yeah, and so they go, okay, we got to get this answer cleaned up. And so whenever you control all the means of information, you can't let the cat slip out of the bag anywhere. And so they've got like 900 questions that any AI system must first answer and answer properly before they'll let its use. This was the article I was reading, and I haven't verified the article, but I was laughing at it when I was reading, because that's what would actually happen. If you've got an open system and you can search anywhere, well, okay, we can't have an open system then, can we? We're going to have a controlled, tight AI system that can't just search all the various open databases. And it must be programmed to come up with these correct answers. You know, you just keep having to work at controlling the message that people can get. And in this society, in this world, I think really ultimately it just doesn't work, and it's just so harmful to people that they can't get the truth.
Well, and I deeply believe that the truth is something that, you know, it kind of is contagious. There's always, when there's a dearth of good information, there's always an interest in finding out what the reality is. And I mean, a testament to that is actually at the founding of the Epoch Times, right? The, you know, Chinese Americans at Georgia Tech, students spin up this student website to talk about the reality when the Chinese regime began this Falun Gong persecution. This little website, thankfully they had great tech people there. They could just kind of exploded as one of the few venues where you could actually know what was really going on. And today, you know, as another testament to that, we use some of the best technologies to break through that great firewall that you mentioned. And unfortunately, because it costs money just to kind of run those things, where they're always maxed out. But there's, you know, millions of people, you know, read Epoch Times Chinese from China, but they have to break through this, you know, tightly controlled system, which requires resources. But we can't open up enough of those holes for people to read, basically.
Absolutely. And I'm so proud of those guys doing that. I used to work with them. I was in the Senate on breaking through the great Chinese firewall, and got some appropriations for them to be able to help with that mission, because the truth was just so powerful. People wanted it, and they're hungry for it. And your point is that they will seek it out, and they will pursue that. And Epoch Times, I think you told me, was something like the 4th largest subscription newspaper in the country now.
It is.
From a 20-year start against these venerable institutions well over 100 years old. I mean, that's amazing, but it also, I think, speaks to the moment. I mean, you're really out there putting forward clear information, it's truthful, and people are going, that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'll pay for.
So speaking of truthful information, we're both going to be testifying at a Congressional Executive Commission on China hearing this coming Thursday. It's titled, "A Market Built on Victims, Stopping Illegal Organ Trafficking in China and Beyond." So what do you think you're going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about the broader picture of this. I know you're speaking there. Ethan Gutman is speaking there, who's been great on writing about these topics. But I'm going to talk about that this is a strategy of the Chinese Communist Party, and it's one that we should turn around and use as an offensive tool against them. And by that I mean, most of the time we're kind of pleading with the Chinese Communist Party, don't do this, stop the organ. We're trying to shame them into something, or pleading with them not to do it. And from a kind of a position of weakness. And we ought to go in from a position of strength on this, saying this is illegitimate for a regime to contend for global leadership that does this to its own people. This should disqualify them from global leadership. And we should go on the offense on things like this instead of really of kind of shying away from it. And Ronald Reagan did this towards the Soviet Union. He would travel the country before he was ever president talking about the godless commies and what they were doing to the Jewish refuseniks. And they also made this point, which I think is the point we're at right now. They are at war with us, whether we realize we're at war with them or not. He said of the Soviet Union at the time. And it's the truth for us with the Chinese Communist Party. They are at war with us, whether we realize we're at war with them or not. And we should mount up. And we're always best when we stand on principles. And we stand on our basic principles, and one of them is religious freedom, that everybody's entitled to do with their own soul what they see fit. We should take that message directly to the Chinese Communist Party and say, you signed the original declaration of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. This is a part of it. Stand by it. Do it. Or you forfeit your leadership in the world.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because Nina Shia, who you have a chapter in your book about as the advocate, she recently has a piece in the New York Post arguing exactly that. Let's take a page out of Reagan and take the principled position. Make sure you speak to the Chinese people, not just to the Chinese regime when you're there, Mr. President.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think ultimately, and not, when I say ultimately, within the next couple of years, you will see that happen. I don't know that you'll see it happen on this meeting, but I think you're going to see that happening, because you've just got these two giant systems against each other. And really the fight is between the CCP and Western civilization. Western civilization built on this Judeo-Christian ethic of every person is created in the image of God and is entitled to human dignity and its own choices. And the CCP, which is there's nothing higher than us. We are it. We are the ultimate authority over man. And which I say is almost a laughable concept. I mean, as flawed and failed and as deadly as this system has been to its own people, and it's the ultimate authority over mankind. But that's really the fight we're into. And my deep concern about this is that the digital surveillance systems and the digital police state that they can create and have created and spread to other dictators around the world. They've got tools available to them that no dictator has had available in the past, and they are very deft and good at this. This is the toughest adversary we've ever been up against.
You know, something just struck me, which I frankly hadn't thought of until I just heard you speaking. But, you know, of course, I've been talking about the value of some of these federal bills, like, for example, the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act and the Falun Gong Protection Act, now called the Falun Gong and Victims of Forced Organ Harvesting Protection Act on the Senate side. At the federal level, the value of these, that actually kind of curbing this a bit, the whole forced organ harvesting, and the value of these state level legislations, you know, not that basically insurance and Medicare, Medicaid can't pay for transplants in China. This is all good, but actually, in a way, right, this is actually, if the Congress decides to pass this, if more states decide to pass these laws, that's actually giving the president leverage, right? And I think the president and the administration is looking for more leverage against the CCP. I just hadn't thought of it that way, because I think that's the way. I think that's a good way to think about. They've built a bunch of leverage around against America, the critical minerals, rare earths, the medical precursors. I mean, some really serious things, and that's not it. You know, sort of deeply intertwined into the, global economy. If we go down, you're going to suffer too. All of that, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, but this is another bit of leverage for the U.S. side potentially.
Yeah. If you're getting me, if I'm a betting man and you're giving me their set of cards or the American set of cards, I'll take our set of cards and play in this. But we got to realize we're in this real fight, and we've got to fight it on principles, and we've got to go at them on these very basic principles. And I think what you're seeing kind of bubble up now organically in the country and in the Congress is that the nation is ahead of our elites on this. The people have already smelled this one out and said, these are bad guys. What they have done and what we know that they have done, and there's a lot of things we don't know, this is an evil system. It produces evil results. And the people are already there. It's now the elites kind of figuring, okay, wait a minute. We made a lot of money off of China, and we got a lot of cheap products in here. We've got to start now figuring out how you break these systems apart and make people in the world pick. I'm either going with the China system of authoritarianism, or I'm going with the American system of Western-style democracy. As many flaws as we may have, you got to make people start choosing.
And as a testament to that, when I first started reporting on this forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China, I remember very distinctly how difficult it was to even talk to people about it.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, sometimes people would just kind of leave the conversation mentally in the middle of the conversation, right? It was kind of frustrating in a way, but then I kind of sympathized as well after I thought about it, because I've gotten a bit desensitized to the whole thing, right? Having kind of reported on it a lot. But it's really, part of the reason I think that I wanted to write Kill to Order is because I saw that there had been this shift that you're talking about. Like, people suddenly are willing to accept. I went on a podcast, notably Mike Rowe became incredibly popular on this issue. I just didn't expect it, okay, let's say. And then, the book being successful. I think you're exactly right. I think we're in this moment where people are kind of ready finally to accept that this Chinese regime is capable of some conventionally unfathomable things. I
think we are at that moment. But I've been around a number of different human rights movements. Now, this is the biggest beast I've ever gone after. The red dragon of China is the biggest one. But there's just this innate sense in a lot of the American people that they can sense the difference between good and evil. And they know there is good and they know there is evil in the world. And we are in a position as a country, as a powerful country, to resist evil that a lot of places can't. And we must do that. And we must drag this along. And I go even further to say, these two systems are diametrically opposed to each other. These systems do not coexist at this level in the world. Now, you could have a small communist country in North Korea, Cuba, which I hope doesn't last a whole lot longer. I hope none of them do. But you're talking about, this is the second largest economy in the world that the CCP has, and they've built a satellite set of countries, and they're exporting this digital authoritarianism technology to at least 80 different countries that we've tracked. Okay, we have got to confront this in this type of integrated world that we're in today.
The book is incredible, China's War on Faith. I found it to be, just kind of deeply riveting as I'm looking at these, some of them are testimonials of people who have overcome unbelievable adversity. Some of it is people who have decided to be champions, right?
Yeah.
And just tell me a little bit about, and of course I've endorsed the book for the record. I want to make
Thank
sure
you.
people know that, right? Because, I'm not a disinterested party. What are people going to find? What is it that you want people to find in the book?
I want them to find truth. I want them to see in the stories that we put forward the incredible durability of faith in face of death. But most of the people, it's a profiles of faith book more than anything, and it's Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Falun Gong are the faith communities that we portray in it, and in each of them you see people just trying to be crushed, a system trying to crush them, and they persevere through it. And ultimately, this war on faith, China will lose it. You don't know how many people they're going to kill along the way. You don't know what carnage is going to be left. Every one of these people have been deeply wounded. One of them still in jail. We didn't report on him directly. He's a guy I'd met, Pastor Wang Yi, incredible public intellectual that...
well, in fact, I think picked up in early 2026, right? If I recall correctly.
Wang Yi, no, that Pastor Ezra Jin is who was picked up earlier and is still in jail. And this now they've expanded the web of Christian pastors they're picking up.
To tell me more about these pastors, because you have quite a number of chapters dedicated to various Christian pastors.
And I did that because it's one of the largest groups still operating in China that's dominantly Han Chinese. The Falun Gong had huge growth when the government allowed them to grow, and then just really has smashed them as much as they possibly could. But there's still the underground church going on in China, both Catholic and Protestant. What has changed recently is now you're seeing the hammer come down on these Christian leaders, even some in the state-sponsored church, if they're not towing the line right. And the expansion of the arrest has taken place. So Pastor Wang Yi was one that was arrested in 2019 that we feature in the book, who I kind of laughed at it when I heard he said it. I'm sure it didn't get a laugh in Beijing, but he said, we're all sinners, including Xi Jinping. And he says that from the pulpit in China. And I thought, man, I'm impressed, buddy, because you know what that's going to get. It's not going to get a laugh in Beijing. And of course, he's arrested, but he's a public intellectual, so they got to kind of treat him a little bit cautiously, but he's still in jail from that point on forward. But now they're rounding up a lot more of the pastors. So we feature a pastor, Pan, who got his whole congregation out through South Korea to a place they didn't need to get visas, then eventually Thailand, and now in Midland, Texas. But he could see it coming. He says this is coming, and now his fellow pastors in a lot of the areas are being arrested and put in jail. And it's this control mechanism. They cannot stand a higher authority than the government. And they're at the point too of this is all out in the open. It used to be pretty quietly done and subtly and kind of trying to freeze people out. Now it's arrest them, put them in jail. Some of them disappear. It's very aggressive and very open now.
Maybe tell me about a little more of kind of the details. I mean, one of the characters, I always not sure how to pronounce her name exactly right, but Murgal.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what an unbelievable story. I mean, at so many levels.
It is. Marigold Tursun, Uyghur woman. And really is kind of a classic case to study of what the Chinese did try and what they're doing now. So she's taken out of her homeland, Xinjiang, East Turkestan, when she's 10 years old because she's very smart. She passes the top of the test. And so, okay, we're taking you to Guangzhou, thousands of miles away from your homeland, and we're going to educate you here. And she hated it, didn't want to do that. We're going to make you into a government apparatchik and send you back. And we're going to get all the Uyghur out of you. We're going to get all the Muslim out of you, and we're sending you back because you're a bright kid. Well, other Uyghurs that went with her, a couple of the girls at 12 years of age committed suicide, jumped out of the building. It's just, I don't want this. I don't want it. She survived it. Eventually gets further educated in Egypt, marries an Egyptian man, and they decide, you know what, she's just way too Muslim for us. And then she gets on the hit list. She has triplets. She goes back to China. They deceive her to come back. They take her triplets from her, kill one of her children. She was a nursing mother at the time. They kill one of her children. They beat her. They put her in prison multiple times. They have police, when she is out, they have police living in her home, sleeping in her bedroom with her. Just these horrible stories. And then to top it all off, this one just really amazes me. They said, okay, we're going to kill you. We've decided it's we're done. But you can pick the way. We can do forced injection with you, or we can shoot you. But you have to pay for each of the 3 bullets. We use 3 bullets to shoot people with. In this sort of just kind of mundane, okay, you get to pick which way you go. Now, if she picks the route of the injection, she doesn't have to pay for it, but they get all her organs. And she signs the paper that, okay, yeah, I'm giving my body to science. Or you can pay, and it's a pretty high price for the 3 bullets on top of it. You're just going, how does somebody even think of something like that? The rawness of it. And she denies it all. It said, just go ahead and shoot me, but these children are actually Egyptians. They're born in Egypt, and the Egyptian government's going to want these children back, and somebody's going to have to take care of them, and that kind of slows them down for a little bit, and they're like, oh, rats, hadn't really thought of that. And that kind of slows the process, and she doesn't get killed, and they ultimately actually release her with her 2 children. But yeah, her story is just, on so many levels, it's at a place where you can't imagine a system that can produce these types of ideas in it, and yet it does, and has, and executes on them. It's like a modern Auschwitz running story of, okay, we're going to kill all these Jews. Now we ought to get the hair, and we ought to get the fillings out of their teeth, and we'll see the old shoes. Yeah, we can still use those. It is so industrial scale and so immoral, and yet you got people executing that in the system.
This is something that I really love about China's war on faith, because, this is something I also try to explain through writing Kill to Order, which is just this sort of very kind of cold instrumentalization of the very, basic human eradication of human dignity, treating bodies as, fodder just to be kind of used in whatever way. This is something very difficult for people to understand.
It is almost impossible for me to understand when I look at it. Or in your book, we can make these senior communist officials be able to live to be 150 if we can get enough spare body parts. What makes you think you're that good? That you should be killing other people for their body parts for you? I mean, it's just inconceivable to me, really, that people could think of themselves as that much better than somebody else, that I will kill you for your organs and this is a good thing. Unbelievable. But that's what I mean about it's the CCP versus Western civilization. In a Western civilization concept, no, everybody's created equal. We don't have equal skills, we don't have equal abilities, but we're all created equal in the eyes of God. We have a human dignity that is inalienable to each of us. To each of us, no matter who you are, no matter what your skill level is, you are created equal. And you just, in that system, no, the masters are better than the people.
I also, as I read the book, and you already started talking about this earlier, I get a lot of hope, because the people that have kind of, whether it's, have kind of gone through a lot and survived and are really fighting the good fight on afterwards. And so, despite the darkness that you just described, I mean, there's a lot of light to be inspired by.
A lot of light to be inspired by. And that's what gives me hope in it too. Is that these are people seeking something above what is here on earth and willing to fight and willing to die for it. And in many cases, like Marigold, who we just talked about, she says, when I've been with her, says, they've already killed me. They killed one of my children. I'm dead. And then she gets transnational oppression, and they say, we know where you are. And then she said, shoot me. You've already killed me. But she continues to speak out at great price to her and to her family that's left back in the country. So there is, and to me, that's the key piece of what we've got to get right in the United States is China's at war with faith, and we should clearly be on the side of their opponents. And that's these people of faith who are in that country, and the religious people are most of the times the first ones attacked, the last ones left standing. It's the only civil society left there, and they're not a rebel cause, but they don't agree with this system. This system is diabolical, and they don't want it. And we should clearly, and I put forward a number of policy ideas, what we should do to elevate these people who are standing against this beast from inside its belly.
Just on one little note as we finish up, I wanted to mention this because, in China, there's something called the United Front Work Department, which of course you're very familiar with, but again, it's one of these institutions that's very difficult for us to conceive. Imagine having a department or a ministry that's one of the top funded ministries or departments in the government that's its exclusive purpose is to destroy all civil society, to subvert, i.e. control, i.e. make not civil society, or destroy all civil society, both within the country and in the diaspora, and frankly beyond, into even American institutions and that are beyond the diaspora, so to speak. I mean, it's sort of inconceivable. We don't have an analogous, massively funded, magic weapon, as Mao called it, system.
Yeah, we don't. And we couldn't even, I guess we could conceive of it, but in my Western mind, I can't. Why would you even think of something like that? With all of the social capital that civil society and civil institutions do. And they're going, no, we don't want that. We want this all controlled and answerable to the government.
It's very difficult for Americans to conceive in particular because this is, de Tocqueville, this is what he pointed out back when he wrote Democracy in America, right? That this sort of Americans getting together to create institutions to solve whatever problem they happen to find important. That's like the beating heart of America. That was what would make America great. That was, and he was right. He was prescient. But that's precisely the thing that this united front, that the CCP seeks to subvert and destroy in its entirety. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I do too. And on a scale that you're just going, how do you maintain a functioning society then if you don't have local people answering local problems? And then it's got to be somebody from Beijing decides, okay, yeah, you got a problem, we will solve it for you. Well, you got to get their attention, you got to get enough resources, you got to keep enough resources coming, and you're just going, this is just not going to work. And it doesn't work, and it didn't work in the Soviet Union, and it didn't work in Eastern Europe, and it's not going to work ultimately in China. Now, near term, they've figured out enough how you can make an economy go by this top-down system. But ultimately, you're really sucking the soul out of people, and you're just making them part of a big machine that is human and is going to make all sorts of flaws and mistakes. And you take away the invisible hand, the Adam Smith invisible hand of solving the problems, and make it all one visible hand, and it's the government's going to solve it. And this has failed everywhere. It's been used around the world, and it ultimately will fail in China too. It's just at what cost?
So now as we actually finish up, you said something interesting earlier, and I just want to finish on this note. You said when it comes to human rights or forced organ harvesting or things like that, we tend to kind of plead, hey, please stop this is bad, and so forth. You said turn the tables or flip it around. Can you explain that a little more to me as we finish?
I think we need to elevate the issue and use it as an offensive tool. I think President Trump needs to bring into the White House people that have been persecuted for their faith from China in public meetings, and have them tell their story and have it broadcast around the world, and have him bring in individuals from Falun Gong and from the Tibetan Buddhists and Christians and Muslims, have them tell the story. Bring in world leaders, bring in world religious leaders, showcase what is taking place in so many places around the world of religious persecution, particularly China, and ask them to stand against this and for religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time. I think he should present to Xi Jinping the 9 Catholic bishops that are held somewhere, we don't know where, in prison, and ask that they be released, and press the Vatican to do the same thing. And also to press them to plead against these and call for the end of these 3 genocides that are taking place in China. I think we ought to send the Secretary of State, the Vice President, one of the 2 to Dharamsala, India, for substantive talks with the Dalai Lama about the future of Tibet. I think we start elevating these in various forums and formats to make the clear point, we are serious about this. And China, you've declared this a red line and a no-go zone, and we don't agree with you. And we're not going to do it that way, because what you're doing is completely wrong and it's evil. And I think he ought to call it out. I think he ought to do a Ronald Reagan and say, this is an evil regime. This is an evil empire. And I would love to see the Pope stand up in Taiwan and say, be not afraid, like Pope John Paul did in Poland. Be not afraid.
Well, Sam Brownback, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
My pleasure to be with you.
Thank you all for joining Sam Brownback and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.